Hello, everybody. I wanted to touch on this it's not an article, it's a document. It's an unclassified document that I found in the FBI vaults of pretty much unclassified documents. It talks about everything from human trafficking to matters like this. I want to talk about this though because I particularly reach out to the black community and trying to wake them up to this game that's being played with them and as well as white people. Um, as a black person in America, we have so many different beliefs about what's happening to our communities, and what's actually going on that's hurting us. But we need to actually boil it all down to the fact that a lot of this stems from other black people who are fraudulent and get paid off of the emotions and the strife of black people. And they do not want people like myself to talk about this kind of stuff. And we need to start to begin to acknowledge what's going on as far as black identity is concerned. So I found this document. It's about 25 pages long, and I'm gonna try to get through it as briefly as I can. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I hope that it's informational enough for you guys to see that we have an issue here, and that this goes back into the Obama administration. Okay, and this actually even goes back even further. We're talking about to the 1960s. See, everything that we've been told pretty much has been a lie. Um, and we believe that everything that is our problem is white supremacy. And it's really disingenuous because the people who are screaming that this is white supremacy are actually the people who are selling out the black community, which happen to be other black people. So it's crazy, but it sounds crazy. And you might say, oh, well, you sound like a coon. Or you sound like, you just hate your own people. No, that's not the case at all. I'm trying to wake up Black America to what's going on. And I get highly censored for doing so, okay? This is not something that's easy for me to do. The backlash is not easy to take because people do not like the truth. And, I'm really taking a lot of heat for the things that I say as it pertains to the truth about what's going on with the black community. I've come to the point where it's like all skin folk are not kinfolk. Okay, we should not be trusting every black so called leader that they throw at us or every black identity group that they throw at us. You know, we should not trust anybody. You know what I mean? You have to be able to discern the truth for yourself. And it without that type of discernment, you're always gonna fall into the trap of believing everything that you're told. Anyway, let's try to get through this because like I said, this is about 25 pages long and it's a lot. So it says the FBI assesses it is very likely that black identity extremist BIE perceptions of police brutality against African Americans spurred an increase in premeditated retaliatory lethal violence against law enforcement and will very likely serve as justification for such violence. The FBI assesses it is very likely this increase began following the 9th of August 2014 shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and the subsequent grand jury November 2014 declaration to indict the police officers involved. The FBI assesses it is very likely incidents of alleged police abuse against African Americans since then have continued to feed the resurgence in ideological motivated violent criminal activity within the BIE movement. The FBI assesses it is very likely some BIEs are influenced by a mix of anti authoritarian, Moorish, sovereign citizen ideology and BIE ideology. The FBI has high confidence in these assessments based on a history of violent incidents attributed to individuals who acted on behalf of their ideological beliefs, documented in FBI investigations and other law enforcement and open source reporting. The FBI makes this judgment with the key assumption the recent incidents are ideologically motivated. It goes on to say, this intelligence assessment focuses on individuals with BIE ideological motivations who have committed targeted premeditated attacks against law enforcement officers since 2014. This assessment does not address BIEs who have attacked law enforcement officers during the course of officers' routine duties, such as responding to calls and traffic stops, in which violent actions were reactionary in nature. This assessment addresses the following key intelligence questions. To what extent are BIEs targeting interests retaliatory? And what cross-pragmatic relationships influence the BIE movement? This assessment is the first FBI analytic intelligence product to assess influences between the sovereign citizen extremist movement and the Black identity extremist movement. The FBI has previously reported on BIE retaliatory violence against law enforcement in two products, both of which findings consistent with this assessment. The 23rd March 2016 FBI intelligence bulletin titled Black Separatist Extremists call for retaliation in response to police-involved incidents could incite acts of violence against law enforcement. Assessed incidents involving allegations of law enforcement abuse and related legal proceedings would likely lead to BSC calls for violent retaliation and incite these domestic extremists to commit violent acts against law enforcement. November 14th, 2014, FBI intelligence bulletin titled Potential Criminal Reactions to Missouri Grand Jury Announcement assessed the announcement of grand jury's decision in the shooting death of Michael Brown in Ferguson would likely be exploited by some individuals to justify threats and attacks against law enforcement and critical infrastructure. Source summary statements. Reporting in this intelligence assessment was derived primarily from FBI and law enforcement investigations and open source reporting, media interviews of subjects posting on social media accounts, and online news articles deemed credible and reliable. The view of FBI investigations occurred between September 2014 and December 2016. The open source reporting was current as of January 17, 2017. Statements made by the subjects to law enforcement during the course of investigations were particularly helpful to identify motivations behind BIE attacks against law enforcement because ideological motivations are infrequently identified or collected. Additionally, reporting on the ideological motivations behind BIE attacks would improve the confidence levels in this assessment. Suspects' grievances are very likely to lead to violent targeting of law enforcement. The FBI judges it is very likely BIE perceptions of police brutality against African Americans have become organizing drivers for the BIE movement since 2014, resulting in a spike of BIEs intentionally targeting law enforcement with violence. In all 6 targeted attacks since 2014, the FBI assesses it is very likely the BIE suspects acted in retaliation for perceived past police brutality incidents. Even though 5 of these attacks occurred following controversial police shootings of African Americans by white police officers, BIE targeting of officers was not, in every incident based on their specific race. On July 7, 2016, Micah Johnson ambushed and shot 11 enforcement officers, killing 5 in downtown Dallas, Texas, during a First Amendment protected protest before being ultimately killed by police. The 5 deceased officers were white. The planned public event was protesting recent officer-involved shootings of African Americans in Louisiana and Minnesota. Based on Johnson's journal writings and statements to police, he appeared to have been influenced by BIE ideology. During the standoff with police, Johnson told police negotiators he was upset about recent police shootings and white people and expressed a desire to kill all white people, especially white officers. Johnson searched and liked social media pages of BIE and black separatist groups and had been ousted from a local BIE group for being too radical, according to an open source news article. On the 23rd of October 2014, Zale H. Thompson attacked four white New York Police Department officers in Queens with a hatchet. One officer received injuries to the arm, and a second officer received an injury to the side of his head. The two remaining NYPD officers at the scene shot and killed Thompson, according to open source reporting. According to open source reporting, Thompson was angered after, quote, a recent spate of deaths at the hands of police, unquote. In his own writings, Thompson advocated for armed struggle against, quote, the oppressors and, quote, mass revolts against the U.S. social, economic, and political systems, which he perceived to be, quote, white dominated. He also described the United States as a, quote, beast and called for, quote, chopping off its head, hands, and feet. NYPD observed tattoos on Thompson's body that indicated he was affiliated with a black separatist extremist group, and pocket litter indicating he may have been associated with another black separatist group, according to law enforcement reporting. It goes on, a little note says, convergence of BIE and Moorish sovereign citizen ideology very likely leads to violence against law enforcement officers. The FBI assesses it is very likely a few of the BIEs who have targeted law enforcement since 2014 were influenced by more than one ideological perspective. The FBI judges it is very likely in 4 of the 6 BIE attacks against law enforcement since 2014, the perpetrators were motivated by a mix of BIE ideology and Moorish sovereign citizen extremist ideology, a category of SCE ideology. The FBI assesses it is very likely BIE adoption of a Moorish SCE identity reinforced a sense of disenfranchisement from society and a perception that the criminal justice system is unjust. Now, I just want to say something. Moorish sovereignty and these black identity extremists, this comes from one thing that I've realized for sure. We as black Americans, we literally don't know our culture here. We feel like we don't have a culture here. And it's honestly because I feel like we have totally refused to accept our culture here. They have brainwashed us to believe that we should hate America and that America was never great for us here, which is a bunch of nonsense because I've said this before. Right after slavery, you had blacks who were in the Senate and who were in Congress. They had businesses, they had nightclubs, they had casinos, they had the Negro Leagues. So, I mean, it's literally to the point where, like, for us to not be aware of this, they've brainwashed us to not only hate America, but then to try to be accepting of other cultures that really a lot of us have no real attachment to, i.e. Africa and all of that. A lot of, there's the ADOS stuff. And it's like, you have to, when you really do the research and you really go do your homework, you realize that a very small percentage of black slaves came from Africa. And there's blacks everywhere. And so black people have totally been disenfranchised from their own history, really, here in America, and they don't even, and we've pretty much been brainwashed to not believe it, to not believe that we've had any significant, we haven't had any significant culture here, when we do, okay? A lot of the legacies that we have been pretty much torn down. I say that it's been torn down with our victim mentality and the way we think, and a lot of us are trying to rise above this idea that, we're just not important here when we absolutely are. Where a lot of us are getting tired of blaming the white man for everything. I mean, honestly, it's getting to the point where there has to be some type of accountability, right? So that's where this, I believe that black people, they start to venture off into these extremist groups and to the Moorish sovereignty and all of that. You don't even need to believe in the Moorish sovereignty if you realize that you as an American citizen are an American sovereign. Okay, you're black in America and you're sovereign here. We are all sovereigns. Sovereignty is worldwide. Okay, unless you know your law and you know um history, then you're not gonna believe this. But you are a sovereign. They just don't tell you that. They make you seem like, oh, you're just a citizen. No, you are more free than you realize, and actually you are the boss of the people who in Congress who are telling you a bunch of nonsense about everything that's going on. You don't need to claim more sovereignty. You know what I'm saying? That's pretty much. And honestly, the more sovereignty stuff comes, it stems deeper than what we're seeing on the surface here. So um, black people in America are getting mixed up with all these different ideologies, and then they're not accepting the culture that they actually have here, which pretty much is about to be wiped out if black people don't turn around and change their attitude about what's going on and do it quickly. That's just my idea or my thoughts. On October 4th and 13th, 2016, an individual allegedly shot at two different police stations in Indianapolis, Indiana. The subject left a handwritten note at the scene of one of the shootings in which he identified himself as a Moor and made anti-white statements. The subject posted pictures on social media of African American men carrying assault rifles behind text calling for social injustice and retribution. The subject was later involved in a shootout with police during his arrest on related charges, according to law enforcement reporting. On July 17, 2016, Gavin Eugene Long ambushed and shot 6 law enforcement officers in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, before eventually being killed by police. The deceased victims included one African American officer and one white officer from the Baton Rouge Police Department, and one white officer from East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office. Long had expressed the black separatist rhetoric both on social media and in his manifesto, including rants against, quote, crackers, and reference to an African American male killed by police in Baton Rouge on July 5th, 2016. In his manifesto, Long expressed his frustrations with the police and criminal justice system in the United States and saw his actions as quote, as a necessary evil in order to create substantial change, unquote. A law enforcement search of Long's laptop contained biographical information and residential addresses of two officers involved in the Alton Sterling shooting, and Google search directions to one of the officers' home address. Long had also declared himself to be a Moor, had changed his, quote, slave name to the Moorish name Cosmo Asar Setepnera, and was carrying a Moorish identification card at the time of his death, according to open source reporting. On September 13, 2016, an individual reportedly intentionally drove his vehicle toward 3 white officers with the police department in Phoenix, Arizona, outside a gas station, striking 2 of them before he was arrested. The subject's social media accounts indicated that he was tied to a BIE group and a Moorish group, and that he was angry over police shootings since at least the killing of Brown in 2014. Consistent with BIE statements on social media, the subject stated, quote, the Caucasian needs to be slaughtered like the pigs that they are, right along with the niggas who serve and protect them, unquote, according to law enforcement reporting. This goes down here to say in this note, Moorish sovereign citizens are a loose network of mostly African Americans who believe they are sovereign entities who do not recognize the authority of the U.S. government. Moorish sovereign ideology derives from the Moorish Science Temple of America, a nonviolent religious and cultural movement founded in 1913 by noble Drew Ali, who taught his followers they were not, quote, Negroes, but Moors, people of North African, Berber, and Arab descent. Some Moorish adherents adopt sovereign citizen strategies to assert diplomatic immunity by claiming membership in fictitious Native American tribes. I'm going to say that again. Fictitious Native American tribes. This is almost as ridiculous as like the black Hebrew Israelites who also spew the same kind of hate for the white man, the Edomites, who talk about the 12 tribes and how Mexicans and Puerto Ricans and all of that are part of this and that we are all somehow connected. And listen, Black people, let me explain something to you about history. Puerto Ricans and them, they own black slaves. This is what I'm saying. When you have celebrities like Fat Joe talking about Puerto Ricans are black too, so I guess it's okay that they could say the word nigga. It's like, I guess that makes it okay, right? I mean, this is where we got to the point where they're trying to totally make you forget about your own culture and be accepting of everybody else. And since we've accepted everybody else into our culture, and I'm not saying that like um it's a bad thing. Like, what I'm saying is that we have become so accepting that we turn around and we complain about it. Oh, everybody's offended because that Puerto Rican girl said the word nigga. Well, I feel like, we've allowed that to happen. And actually I think just saying it all together is just something that we should stop doing and take it out of our vocab. But that's another subject for another day. These fictitious Native American tribes, that, and this is what I'm saying, we believe false history, and we really have to do our homework. What we've been told about history has either been over exaggerated or absolutely just not the truth, okay? Including the facts about slavery. We want to ignore certain facts about slavery and make it seem like black people were the only enslaved people ever on the earth. And that is just straight up nonsense. Any person with common sense, real common sense, knows that that is nonsense. And so, like, you have the recent, everything is offensive, everything is racist now these days, right? And saying the word lynching is, Trump can't say that. Like, I'm just saying that, giving that as an example, Trump can't say that because it just pertains to black. No, it doesn't. Lynchings were happening to everybody. Just here in America, it was happening to black people by one group of people, and it was, I'm gonna just say it was the Democrats. That's why I don't understand why black people give 98% of their votes to Democrats, who are the party of lynching and slavery. But I digress. Claiming descent from settlers who arrived in North America during the pre-Columbian era, or identifying as foreign nationals or ambassadors. Okay? Black separatist extremists, an introduction. This is the source. They're naming down here. Black extremist separatists and introduction of law enforcement. On November 21st, 2014, a BIE was arrested and eventually convicted for purchasing explosives the subject intended to use in the Ferguson area upon the release of the grand jury verdict for the police officer involved in the shooting death of Brown. He previously discussed a desire to kill the white St. Louis County prosecutor and the white Ferguson police chief who were involved in Brown's case, according to FBI case information. Additionally, the subject had ties to a BIE group that had discussed ambushing police. Furthermore, the subject had ties to the sovereign citizen movement, filed paperwork declaring himself an Aboriginal Indigenous Free Sovereign Moor, and possessed a Moorish identification card, according to open source reporting. BIEs have historically justified and perpetrated violence against law enforcement, which they perceived as representative of the institutionalized oppression of African Americans, but had not targeted law enforcement with premeditated violence for nearly 2 decades, leading up to the lethal incidents observed beginning in 2014. BIE violence peaked in the 1960s and 1970s in response to changing socioeconomic attitudes and treatment of blacks during the civil rights movement. BIE groups such as Black Liberation Army, which was created in the early 1970s to, quote, take up arms for the liberation of self-determination of black people in the United States, unquote, engaged in murders, bank robberies, kidnappings, racketeering, possession of explosives, and weapons smuggling. From 1970 to 1984, the BLA was involved in at least 38 criminal incidents, including 26 armed assaults, 3 assassinations, 4 bombings, and 4 hijackings and hostage takings. Almost half of these attacks took place in predominantly African American neighborhoods and targeted law enforcement officers without regard to their race, according to an open source database. Without regard to their race. Sometimes black officers get caught up in this as well, and get caught up in this violence as well. And, it's just ridiculous. I just want to throw that in. It's ridiculous. The ideological the ideology, let me just say, the ideology of these groups to hate the white man and ramp up all this racial hate is what the target of these groups are, and they know it. A lot of these, the Black Democratic Socialists of America and all of them, like these groups, their main target is to push that. Their main objective is to push the message to always hate the white man, and everything is a retaliation against the white man. And white people this and white people that, and hate, hate, hate. I've come to learn that you cannot fight hate with hate. It doesn't work that way. Okay? There has to come a time where our ignorance really does have to stop. It's ignorant. All black people don't think alike. It's like we are not all a monolith, right? We don't all think alike. We don't all feel the same. We know that there are two different groups of black people. We know that there's blacks who take care of their family and their kids and have a father in the home. And then you have ignorant black folks or niggas who do not want to really progress to positivity. They're holding the rest of us down. I call them the weak links in the black community. The ones who run around here with the victim mentality. Oh, woe is me, and I gotta blame the white man for everything instead of being accountable for the things that I do. That is the attitude that a lot of these black ignorants have. And what they do is that if you so choose to want to move away from the neighborhood and to do better for yourself, then all of a sudden you're a bougie black coon, Uncle Tom, even though that doesn't make sense because Uncle Tom was the hero, but I digress. And, you are all kinds of traitors and all of that because you choose to move away from the nonsense. Nobody wants to live in a neighborhood where your own people are robbing you, robbing the elderly, breaking into your homes, shooting you. Black people refuse to acknowledge the black on black crime. Okay? They refuse, and then even that, they still want to blame that on the white man. As if it was the white man standing behind the gun, pulling the trigger. We make up 13% of the population, and yet we are responsible for 65% of the violent crimes in this country. 65%. Now, the left media is not going to tell you this because the left media has a narrative. You will begin to notice this if you really pay attention. The leftist media will not report any stories if it is black on white crime, for instance, or if it's black on black crime. Only when it is white on black crime is when they want to make it headline news and it's spread everywhere throughout the nation. But there's other stories like this that you don't really hear a lot about at all because it does not fit the narrative. When you want to brainwash a group of people into believing one type of narrative, you will suppress the truth and push out the lie. What happened in Ferguson to Michael Brown was absolutely justified. What happened to Alton Sterling was justified. With Eric Garner, justified. And then on top of that, his daughter even admits that it was they try to exploit that to make money off of it. They try to exploit these cases to make money off of it. Your Al Sharptons, right? They go there to exploit the deaths of these people and make it seem like it was something racial when it absolutely was not. When there was an actual crime being committed. Okay? Only when it is a white officer involved shooting and a black victim do they want to push it to the front of the news so that black people will react with their emotion, because that's what is going on. There's no logical thinking anymore within the black community. It's all emotional. And because they know that they can play on your emotions, it is the easiest job to do. I keep saying this too. Racism is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Okay? It's a business. And I've said this before because Booker T. Washington said this before about the group of black people, the Negroes, whose job it is to keep other black people in their grievances. So as long as these people can keep you in your grievances, they're going to continuously exploit your emotions and make money off of that. Does that make sense? We have to stop, we have to learn to stop reacting to every story that might be racially involved and actually do the research and get all the facts. The problem is that you have a majority of the black community who refuses to read and do their own research. So because they refuse to do this, they automatically believe the headline that they read and automatically get in their feelings. And it's like, oh, it was racial again. Oh, the white man, oh, screw those crackers. Oh, the law enforcement. That is the reaction that they expect from you. We need to stop reacting with our emotions. I learned this a long time ago when I was waking up to all of this that was going on. A lot of this stuff, too, I used to follow some of these black extremist groups. I've had Moors come and talk to me about what I should, how I should do, what I should do, and how to be a Moorish sovereign. Listen, I have to tell you brothers that push that message. You are already sovereign. You just have to accept that you are already sovereign and learn the law and then fight for what is rightfully yours. We are all sovereigns, okay? You don't need some type of identity card to tell you that you are a sovereign. And, it all starts with being able to accept the fact that you are American. You are born here in America. You're American. Okay? I don't even like referring to myself as an African American. I'm not from Africa. I'm an American. You don't hear blacks in Canada talking about I'm an African Canadian, do you? No. We know where the word African American came from. That was something that Jesse Jackson attached to black people out here. We are Americans. If you're born here in America, you're an American. And I don't understand what is the problem with being American. That the problem is, I can tell you why. The problem is that you don't know your history. And you're not proud of the history, regardless of the past and slavery and all of that we've pretty much been able to get past. But a lot of people don't want you to forget slavery. That's why I say this too. They always come out with these slave movies to keep trying to remind you of slavery because they want you to feel emotional about slavery. That's all they want you to do. We have to get up from slavery. That's what I love. Booker T. Washington. He's one of the greatest blacks in our time, one of the greatest speakers. I mean, not in our time, but back in the time. 1911 is when he wrote about, the Negro race who keeps black people in their grievances, right? These people did not let slavery stop them from progress. We should be following that example, not the victim mentality, as oh, woe is me mentality. It all it does is hurt the community. You know what I mean? If you really feel a type of way about law enforcement officers, instead of going out and committing crimes, why don't you apply to be officers and police your own communities? The other thing that we have to do is build the family back up. Black people played a very huge part, and I'm talking about black political leaders or whatever have you, played a big part in the destruction of the black family. It was the Congressional Black Caucus at the end of the day who agreed right along with the who basically went right along with the crime bill that was, by the way, done up by Joe Biden. A lot of you guys call that man Uncle Joe, and he's the most racist man you'll ever come across. Not the president that we have now. See what I'm saying? Black people have been giving 98% of their vote to the real party of racism and slavery and hatred. And they still support it to this day. A lot of you still believe that the Republican Party switched and that the Republicans are the racists, but you guys don't even realize that it was the Democrat Party who were lynching black people and white Republicans who were helping black people. It's insane that we have come this far now to where you can actually see them ramping up the racial tension and the hate for law enforcement officers. And now law enforcement officers don't even want to come into your neighborhoods and help police them from the ignorant black people who are robbing and stealing and killing and raping, doing drive-by shootings. FYI, for all of you who say, mass shootings is a white people thing, what do you think a drive-by shooting is? It's a mass shooting. When you killing 3, 4, or more people, that's a mass shooting. Black people commit just as many mass shootings as so-called white people, but it just goes unacknowledged. Because, we must not see drive-bys as being mass shootings, even though 6, 7 people die. You know what I mean? It makes zero sense. Start to really holding the people in the community accountable for things they do. This no snitching and all of that has got to stop. Because as long as we keep letting the crime and all of that happen in the community, and these gangs and all that happen in the community, your communities will continue to be destroyed. This isn't a white issue at the end of the day. In our own communities, we have black people who are destroying us. And it's insanity. And when I call this out, oh, you're a coon. You're an Uncle Tom. You're a bedwench. You know how that feels to be called a bedwench? When you're just trying to wake up people to reality? A bedwench? I am all about the black family. A bedwench? What is that? A bedwench is what? Somebody who sleeps with like a white man? When I have a black fiance, I'm black. It's crazy and it's insanity to sit here and actually receive the backlash that I receive for saying the things that I say. But it's, I've come to the point in my life where it's like we have to be accountable for the things that we do. And there's not very many people willing to be accountable for their actions. They would still rather blame everybody else. Let's continue. BIE violence has been rare over the past 20 years, and there is sparse evidence of any conversions with SCEs who adhere to Moorish beliefs, who have historically engaged in nonviolent fraudulent schemes, including production of fraudulent personal identification documents such as internationalist motorist certifications, passports, vehicle titles and registrations, and birth certificates in support of their claims of sovereignty. In addition, although non-Moorish SCEs have committed lethal violence against law enforcement in the past, this violence has typically occurred in response to encounters with law enforcement, for example, during traffic stops or the issuing of warrants, rather than premeditated targeted aggression. In addition, not all self-identified Moors are sovereign citizens, and not all sovereign citizens Moors engage in violence against law enforcement or other illegal activity. The FBI has previously reported on BIE retaliatory violence against law enforcement in 2 products. This intelligence assessment addresses actual incidents of lethal retaliatory violence. The previous Black identity extremism intelligence products discussed calls for potential retaliatory violence, not actual violent incidents. Recent lethal violent incidents may be indicative of a resurgence of targeted violence within the BIE movement. Analysis of alternatives. The FBI considered the alternative hypothesis that retaliatory violence against law enforcement is not ideologically motivated, but rather a result that some individuals may simply harbor animosity toward police and exploit racial tensions as an excuse to commit acts of violence. The FBI, however, assesses this alternative is very unlikely in the cases analyzed in this assessment because strictly criminal subjects typically commit spontaneous, quote, defensive acts of violence against police rather than proactive targeting and use idiosyncratic reasons unrelated to ideologies such as financial gain and personal disputes to justify their actions. The FBI further judges it is very likely BIEs proactively target police and openly identify and justify their actions with social political agendas commensurate with their perceived injustices against African Americans, and in some cases, their identified affiliations with violent extremist groups. Outlook. The FBI assesses it is very likely that BIE's perceptions of unjust treatment of African Americans and the perceived unchallenged illegitimate actions of law enforcement will inspire premeditated attacks against law enforcement over the next year. This may also lead to an increase in BIE group memberships, collaboration among BIE groups, or the appearance of additional violent lone offenders motivated by BIE rhetoric. The FBI further assesses it is very likely additional controversial police shootings of African Americans and the associated legal proceedings will continue to serve as drivers for violence against law enforcement. The FBI assesses it is likely police officers of minority groups are also targeted by BIEs because they are also representative of a perceived oppressive law enforcement system. Possible indicators for BIEs posing a violent threat to law enforcement include advocating for violence against law enforcement, violent anti-white rhetoric, attempts to acquire illegal weapons or explosives, and affiliations with others in both the BSC and sovereign citizen extremist movements. Intelligence requirements. The intelligence assessment was prepared by the FBI. Now, some of this stuff that is confidential is going to have these white black where it's blacked out. So just so you guys know, some of this stuff is not all unclassified. And this is of the counter terrorism division. Comments inquiries may be addressed to the section chief, right? So Appendix A expresses of likelihood or probability. Phrases such as the FBI judges and the, quote, FBI assesses, and terms such as, quote, likely and, quote, probably convey analytical judgments and assessments. The chart approximates how expressions of likelihood and probability correlate with percentages of chance. The FBI only uses likelihood expressions. Furthermore, the FBI does not derive judgments via statistical analysis and will not use expressions of probability to convey uncertainty in external FBI intelligence products. This is unclassified. There's a box here that says terms of likelihood and terms of probability. And then you have a section that says almost no chance, very unlikely, unlikely, roughly even a chance, likely, very likely, almost certainly. And it says remote, highly improbable, improbably, roughly even odds, probable, highly probable, and nearly certain. So you have like it's 1 to 5%, 5 to 20. I think it's like 20%, 20 to 45%, and so on and so forth. But let's go down. So Appendix B, confidence and assessments and judgments based on a body of information. Confidence levels reflect the quality and quantity of the source information supporting judgment. Consequently, the FBI ascribes high, medium, or low levels of confidence to assessment as follows. High confidence generally indicates the FBI's judgments are based on high quality information from multiple sources. High confidence in a judgment does not imply the assessment is a fact or certainty. Such judgments might be wrong. While additional reporting and information sources may change analytical judgments, Such changes are most likely to be refinements and not substantial in nature. Medium confidence generally means the information is credibly sourced and plausible, but not of sufficient quality or corroborated sufficiently to warrant a higher level of confidence. Additional reporting or information sources have the potential to increase the FBI's confidence levels or substantively change analytical judgments. Low confidence generally means the information's credibility or plausibility is uncertain. The information is too fragmented or poorly corroborated to make solid analytic inferences, or the reliability of the sources is questionable. Absent additional reporting or information sources, analytical judgments should be considered preliminary in nature. So let's go back up here real quick. Highly probable, it's at 80 to 95% is they're highly probable, right? It's almost no chance, right? It's at 1 to 5%. So that's where that's at. So if they're highly probable, it's going to be 80 to 95%, or even if they're nearly certain, it's going to be 95%, 99% that they're certain of the facts that they have, right? So and this is just on that scale that they're showing here, for example. So I just wanted to go back and show you guys that. So end notes, we got the end notes, which I probably won't get too much into. See, it talks about the different sources, right? You have the 5 Dallas officers who were killed as payback. Police chief says on July 9, 2016, there was a New York Times article assessed, and then it just gives you, these are all just the sources right here. Okay, they talk about everything from the police. These are just all the sources of everything that was in the document so far. Okay, and like I said, I will leave the link to this in the description box, and you guys can read it for yourself. I'll also leave the link for the whole FBI vault if you guys are interested into looking into anything else that may involve, human trafficking, etc. There's a lot of good information in there, stuff that, of course, you're not going to hear in the media, you're not going to hear in the news, you're not going to hear anywhere else. Here's the thing. My message for the quote-unquote black community is this: we really have to stop thinking with emotions and start thinking more logically, okay? We do not realize the game that's being played with us, and so we fall right into the trap of becoming more racially extreme, as far as, literally, I there's so many people that follow that I'm friends with on Facebook who have this type of thinking, this extreme thinking, and it's gotten to the point where it's like I'm just deleting everybody with this kind of thinking, because you can't, there's no arguing or debating with these people. They're stuck in their beliefs, okay? Everything is the white man's fault. Everybody else is to blame. Trump is to blame. Everybody else is to blame but themselves, or they refuse to hold other people accountable for the things that they do. In a way, it's like victim blaming as well. Well, maybe they deserved it. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. This type of thinking gets you absolutely nowhere. And if we really want to progress as a community, then we're going to have to do better as far as holding our own accountable for the things that we do. The other thing that we have to do is build the family back up, which, I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. I just don't know. A lot of, black fathers are either being killed by other black men, or, gang violence, or they're in prison for committing a crime, or, it's just, they're just, not there. We just have to change our way of life and the way that we think. And for those of you who are easily offended by what other black people have to say about what goes on in the black community, sorry, but we're not sorry. I'm just at the point now where it's like, it's ridiculous. The way, your political stance doesn't make sense. And, you guys still look at the Obamas as your saviors. And when we tell you how fraudulent these people are, you guys don't want to hear it. It's like, it comes to a point where, like I said, your ignorance has to really stop. We have to become more aware and politically mature about what's going on. We've been selling ourselves out for years, not white people. We've been selling ourselves out by continuing to not educate ourselves and not do the research. That you're selling yourself out by not doing that. So anyway, you guys, let me know what you guys think about this. I don't even know if they'll even let um the comments go. Like, they disable my comments when they don't want people speaking on certain, like they did it on one of my videos, my last video I did about YG. They disabled the comments. I didn't do that. They disabled those comments, because and there's only two reasons why they do it. Either I did it myself, or they feel like it is something too offensive for minors. That's what their other excuse is, which I don't get, but I digress. So yeah, if I'm talking about something like this, the likely chance that it gets a bunch of views and shares and all that stuff, highly doubtful. They do not want this type of information out there, right? So anyway, you guys, I'll leave it at that. Have a great day. Peace.